Hello, and welcome to another episode of Heretics to Hegemony. I am your host, Aleph, and I am, as always, joined by my amazing co hosts, Mr. J Nasty and Jeremiah. To start very quick, and because there's so much to talk about, this is the week that Charlie Kirk got assassinated in Utah Valley College, I believe it's called, in Utah. And for those who don't know or don't live in the U.S., it is quite an important event, not necessarily or only by itself and unto itself, but also because of what will happen afterward. And because Mr. Nasty generally, and especially in this case, has much more information, I wanted to ask him to give us a little bit of background and say what happened and what do you think will happen, and just overall set a picture of where we are and how things are looking for America.
Right. So Charlie Kirk was a um, political influencer, podcaster. He was well known for setting up debates on university campuses in which he would engage in all sorts of topics. He was definitely what you would consider to be conservative, right wing, but I honestly probably wouldn't call him far right. I wouldn't call him that. He's not like Nick Fuentes level, right? But definitely on the right. And he was on a tour at Utah Valley University, which is in Orem, Utah. It's about 30 minutes south of Salt Lake City. The event had only been going on for, I believe, about 20 minutes. He was asked, engaging in a back and forth discussion, was asked a question about, he was actually being asked a question about trans shooters and trans school shooters, recent trans school shooters. And after making a response, a report is heard. You can see very visibly there's been multiple angles, I'm sure, as everybody has seen, of him being hit in the left side of his neck and slumping over immediately, and then of course chaos ensuing thereafter. Immediately it turned into finger pointing on the internet, which of course we knew was going to happen. Um, what I think what I'm really more concerned about with this situation is that this is, say what you will about like Charlie Kirk. I don't agree with anything that pretty much anything that he had to say. Um, but college campuses and civil discourse and having a conversation with people is probably like the best experience. Like it's kind of the backbone of like this republic if you can keep it right. Like, and what disturbs me about this assassination, because that's exactly what it was, is that Charlie was actually like a civilian, right? So like if you're the president, yeah, somebody's gonna take a shot at you. You know what I mean? Because it comes with the territory. Even people that are in elected government officials. But this is just a person who's like, I mean, he's doing the same thing, quite frankly, that we're doing, right? Having conversations, sometimes difficult conversations for people to hear. Um, I don't really want to get into like you know, the meat of his, message or anything like that. Political violence is just not the way that you're really going to solve much of the problem. It's not. I'm not really sure this young man what he thought he was going to accomplish by this, because now all you're going to be left with are the fucking groypers, guys. Like, you thought he was bad. Like, look at the Nick Fuentes crowd. Look at the really far right. Like, y'all shot the motherfucker who was like, let's have a conversation about stuff. Yeah, you didn't like what he had to say, and I didn't like a lot of what he had to say either. But that's neither here nor there to me in this conversation, whether or not somebody's political ideology. I always go back to the night. I think it was the 1977 case The ACLU was freshly formed, at least the Illinois chapter, um, when Jewish lawyers took up the case to defend Nazis, right? Um, because that's why freedom of speech is important. That's how, if you're gonna participate in this American system, right? Having the ability to talk about and debate ideas in an open forum, which is where universities are supposed to be. That's actually the best place for people to be having these conversations, is in universities. Now, I never really liked Charlie's style of, always felt like he was punching down. It's pretty easy when you've got a whole stack of facts and then you've got a 22-year-old, blue-haired lib who doesn't really have a lot of life experience, and you can just run circles around them. And I always wanted to see him more engaging in debate with people that I felt were more of equal footing. Dean Winters, maybe Harry Sasson, a couple of the some of the left, some of the younger left influencers that are actually gaining traction, and starting to kind of be a counter voice to this. There's a big movement of young conservative white men, right? Like, this is a big thing that's going on, and all this has done is created 10,000 more people that are going to take up the voice of Charlie, right? So that's what I don't understand about the person who did this, like what exactly they were going to solve, because I don't really care about their ideology, whether or not they were right or left. I don't really care about that. I care more about what did they think this was going to solve? Like, what is the message, right? What is the message that's being seen? This was live streamed, all over the world, right? Like, watching this man bleed out. Um, but what I fear is a tit for tat aggression. I fear that, because what happens is you get a lot of people who are right, you get a lot of people who are left, and then you get a lot of people, not a lot of people actually, but groups of people that are on the very margins and extremes of those rights and lefts, right? And when you have the people that are in the middle margins that are aping and kind of sort of shaping the narrative, it's the people that are on those far extremes that are going to then take that as a call to action, right? So, the immediate response from I wouldn't even say far right people, but moderately right people, was basically calling for blood. And that's a very, like, dangerous place to be, is when, because every right-minded person knows that they're probably not going to go and actually retaliate, but there might be people who are on the fringes who are like, okay, well, they got one of ours. I'm going to go try to kill fucking Dean Winters, or I'm going to go try to kill Gavin Newsom, or I'm going to go try to kill some prominent, you know, that's what I fear too, is that it'll be this back and forth of, violence. I don't know. It's a The whole situation is very disturbing, and it's a sea change too, I think, for America right now. It's kind of a watershed moment, and I was trying to think of any other moments. There's been, political assassinations, but not really anything since the 60s. The 70s, you had a lot of turmoil, Weather Underground, and, Patty Hearst, and, these, but we haven't seen this kind of political division since that time. And, I just, I don't know what good can come of this. I don't understand how any right-minded person could think, well, dude deserved to get shot in the neck. It's like, no, the dude doesn't deserve to get shot in the neck because you disagree with his opinion. You should just go and have better facts than him and win the argument. And by doing this, it is like completely, and I don't know if that was the goal of the shooter, was to further the divide, right? I don't know. The whole thing, I honestly don't quite know what to make of it, because it's such a strange thing to happen, right? Like, it's so public, it's so, it didn't happen in, like, somebody didn't, like, whack him at night in his bed, or anything like that. This was literally live streamed in front of the world. And I, th- I and One part of me actually is kind of like, I hope that it chills people out a little bit. I hope that this is like created enough of like, but I fear that it hasn't, like, enough for people to maybe actually start having some like conversations with each other that are difficult. But I mean, that's the problem, is these people can't. There's also this terminally online sort of culture of people that don't equate, like, they don't have like value for like human life. You know what I mean? Like, there's no like value that's like placed on, like, okay, like, someone can have a shitty opinion, right? Like, but the question becomes is like, do they deserve to die to have their shitty opinion? Um, that's a very antisocial behavior to me, right? To think that somebody deserves to die because of their political opinion.
I agree. Um, before I give it to you, Jeremiah, I wanted to say that personally, I completely agree that regardless of who we're talking about, what happened to this person is criminal act. It is inhumane. It is unjust. I personally, I'm not speaking for you all. I'm just speaking for myself. As you said, this should not happen to anyone, especially when it's about politics, especially when it's a person that does not have elected or legal power or military and law enforcement power. Technically, he is a civilian. He wields a lot of power, that's for sure. And at some point, we will get to his ideas and rhetorics. But just on a personal level, I have not watched the video. I don't think I'm going to watch the video. I have this thing about watching actual death of people on videos. So I probably will not watch it, but I have heard, and both from you and other people, the violent nature of that. And perhaps one of the reasons I don't watch them is because of that violent reality of somebody losing their lives. It is never a pretty heroic thing, whether it's in war, where it only looks pretty in the movies when the hero does it to the anti-hero or whatever. But in real life, we all saw. However, I will say this, and Jeremiah, I wanted to hear what you say. You have to say that, given where we are, I actually have a list of few things that happened in the past few years, especially since the first Trump era time. I remember, I don't know if you remember the guy who was arrested for plotting to kidnap and execute Gretchen Whitmer. Yeah. And then there was obviously the biggest one, at least in terms of image and all that, was January 6th attack on U.S. Congress, which I have never seen anything like that before. Although it was not assassination, it led to cops being killed. Somebody tried to smash Nancy Pelosi's husband head with a hammer, and the assassinations on Trump. Although most of those has to do with power, political power. The assassination of Mangione, even, I would say that is assassination, in a very cold blooded way. But that I wanted to say, or at least run the other direction with the fact that it seems to me that this whole idea of fixing your problems with from the barrel of a gun is a policy that the US implemented on every other place. Now it's coming home, kind of. I don't know if it makes sense, because at least in many places that I visit, and they're suffering from extreme amount of political violence. And I've been to countries in the Middle East and some countries in North Africa. All of them blame US and how the US is supporting this and that. I don't want it to take it international. I will just say that a lot of what I'm hearing is one of the reasons we all are afraid of what will happen next, right, is because after January 6th, after Nancy Pelosi's husband, no Democratic or left blue liberal grabbed their AR-15. And, I think the fear is that the right would do something really, really unhinged. And Jeremiah, I'm sure you have something to say about this whole thing.
Well, I've brought this up before with a lot of discussions we've had, which is, this and Trump's flashback making this even worse when it comes to riling up the base. Uh, it's not the liberal I see in the grocery store with the big fat belly and the 9mm sitting on his fucking hip. They, the biggest problem with the liberals are they're not armed. Because if shit does go down, if things do get violent, if Trump does inspire, I mean, they ran over cops on January 6th. They just pushed them out of the way and beat them down. I mean, like, yeah, they've got that, idealism uniting them, and they twist the Constitution. The Second Amendment that's not what we're talking about. Or I think it's the second that's the gun. I can't remember. I'm having one of those mornings, but they twist it all. They're intimidating. They want to intimidate. I really don't understand how the evangelical right wing and the Okies of this fucking country have gotten so behind this idea that they're the real Americans. Because America is supposed to be a melting pot. We had a Statue of Liberty. We have a Statue of Liberty. I mean, I'm sure France wants to take it back at this point. And if you read all of that, we're supposed to, provide haven. I mean, I know my family came from a different country originally. Aleph, I'm pretty sure yours did, just by the general, nasty, same thing, right? We're all immigrants. And it's twisted. And it's all this hate speech. And my thing is, Charlie Cook got shot. I've been in neighborhoods where people get shot all the time. And most of that's because of racial discrimination. This hate speech and Trump putting gasoline on it. We're talking about a kid who probably didn't have any real reason. They're all confused at that age, and the internet has twisted their brains, and the lack of a social structure that has any emotional care. It's us versus, we're all older. Can you imagine growing up in a time where the only guidance you're provided is a screen? Where there's no emotional depth in anything that we
Yeah, I
provide?
mean, the stuff that's coming out about the guy who's the shooter too is he's one of these terminally online kids. You know what I mean? He's everything was all troll language. It was all very internet, troll languagey shit. Like one of these perpetually online people.
But I remember at least once we had this offline discussion with Jay that it started in certain ways while you were listening to AM radio way back in I don't remember exactly what you told me, but you told me that when you drive across the country, you heard stuff on the radio that it was, what did you say, like enemy?
Well, and my point is, I mean, I've said this for a long time, and we've definitely put it in other conversations, whether it's hit tape or not. But, America, because of the place we are in this world and the power that we represent and the distance we have, the only thing that could ever take us down was from the inside. The only thing that could take us down is from the inside. And it definitely seems like that's what the radical right seems to want to do with this country. And if we go from that, it really is, we can go even further back, and I'm sure Nasty could bring more context to this, but it starts with the Rush Limbaugh. And that entire blowhard voice that controlled the AM radio before there was a YouTube, before there was all of this stuff. And then it turns into your Bill O'Reillys and all these other guys. And
Rush
no,
Limbaugh, Newt Gingrich was kind of a big architect of this kind of, I guess what you would see, like you can kind of trace the DNA back to there, right? And then that eventually kind of molded into the Tea Party, and the Tea Party kind of dissolved and fell apart, and then sort of, but there's always been this kind of like group within the right that wants something different, right? Like they want something that is not the traditional Republican Party, right? So the rise of MAGA is not anything that's surprising. People love something to latch onto, right? Like they want to latch onto something because they want to be part of something. They want to feel like they're, like they matter, right? So I don't know. I just feel like, this is and you're right, Jay. Like, people do? They get shot every day, right? They get shot in the ghettos. They get shot. It doesn't, like Charlie's death is just another death in America that happens every day from various reasons, right? It's just this one was incredibly public, and he was also a darling of the Republican Party, right? And I'm glad that you mentioned the way that Trump responded, because I mean it was not, you don't want to, that's pouring gasoline on a fire already, right? Like you've already got the right, grabbing the pitchforks and calling for blood. These are also the same people that are like, I'm a Christian, and I'm like, whoa, maybe I'll need to take a moment and like breathe, and also maybe let, well, I don't know about the FBI do their work. I think the local law enforcement would probably do a better job than the FBI. That what a shit show that whole thing was. Cash Patel is just an embarrassment. Um, I mean, he had announced that they had a suspect in custody, and it was just a fucking boomer at the front, in the front row, who was like, shoot me instead. Just a crazy guy who was there. So they nabbed that fucking guy. And then there was another dude like 3 blocks away who had an air rifle in his car that he uses to like shoot squirrels on his property, and they fucking drug that dude out. And then Cash Patel goes online and says, "We got him, guys, we got him." And then like the cops interview him for 20 minutes and realize they don't. And then now the story is that it wasn't even the police, the investigation that was responsible. It was the freaking or the dad, or a friend of the dad apparently, that had to get involved, and then a youth pastor convinced the kid to turn himself in, and so on and so forth, right? The story keeps, but what it does paint is that the FBI is inept, and Cash Patel is also just, I mean, come on, man, like, what the fuck are y'all doing, And not to even mention there was a school shooting on the same fucking day, you know what I mean? Like, on the same day that this happened, there was a school shooting, right? Like, this is a problem. This is a systemic problem. And I want to just abandon the whole idea that like guns are not going anywhere, guys. It's not happening. It's not, right? There's more guns than Americans. That box is already, you cannot put it back inside, right? It's never going to happen. Um, so it has to be about sensible gun legislation, right? Like that's what it always comes back to. But I mean, you get people that will just, they just think a schizophrenic person should be allowed to buy a gun. They don't care, you know what I mean? Like they have literally no qualms about who there are. Again, unfortunately, it's the people that are always the on the farthest of the extremes that tend to have the loudest of voices. And
I mean, the when it comes to legislation, unfortunately, the Democrats are not really capable
Democrats
of.
fucking are just pathetic anyway. Like it's just so fucking sad. Like they're just, I can't even with them anymore. I
Well,
just
and,
can't.
and all of that goes back to lobbyists and money in politics because I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or Republican; they're all bought and
No,
sold.
no, they're all fucking bought
They're
and
all
sold. They're
bought and
all going
sold.
out to lunch together and chuckling
Or they
and blah
used
blah
to go to
blah,
lunch
but
to
having
yeah, yeah,
drinks.
and
You
used
know, like
but the
they're
lob
all,
it's capitalism, it's money, it's the ability to keep us undereducated, ill-fed, whether or not you're overfed or not. I mean, everything about our society seems to be based on achieving some sort of financial or power. None of it has to do with any like self-satisfaction or self-improvement. Everything that they're pushing has this like 2,000-year-old morality that has nothing to do, didn't have anything to do with reality back then. Trying to push it on today and not appreciating the fact that we were actually, that's the crazy thing. This entire flashback, this anti-woke thing, because I'm anti-woke, but for a completely different reason. But they, they're so scared of losing even the smallest percentage of their power. Christian white males still run the world. Yet
yeah,
we had
for
to
sure.
like they for the last so many years they've lost
Or many
footing. And
Jewish white
truthfully, they
males.
haven't lost much footing. These voices in the background though have been preaching that they've been losing footing. But we've made progress very, very slowly towards having some sort of equality because yes, as a country we have fucked a lot of people over. And the smallest amount of change in that, and they are scared as shit, and they have come out fucking, and because of this progression underneath, this AM radio, this blowhard, this Fox News, where they have just taken control of what facts are and what we're really aiming at. Like I said, like what the Christian churches now, like the evangelicals are professing, none of that sounds very Christ-like.
That's the problem too, is because the left is doing the same thing at the same time, right? They're also trying to shape truth, right? So you have both sides trying to like shape truth, because they all have their enclaves, right? MSNBC has its enclave, right? And that's where, you know what I mean? So like, I think that one thing I can definitely agree with on anything on the right has to say is that the mainstream media is fucked, right? Like we cannot get actual news anymore, right? Like it's always a spin, it's always a narrative, it's always like I always joke about it, but it's not even like the best place to get news on America is from like Al Jazeera, right? Like a place that doesn't have any real skin in the game. Like they do, but they don't. You know what I mean? Like if you actually want to get just like the news, right? Like I don't know, like what happened to the fucking age of Cronkite? You know what I mean? Like what? I mean, I know what happened. It's the 24-hour news cycle happened, and so it became, we have to always have news. We have to always have news. Well, we don't have enough news, so now we have to manufacture news, right? So,
Well, nowadays we always do have news. It's kind of
nowadays, yeah. Nowadays we do. But like you remember in the early days of like CNN, it would be they'd have like, let's look at this squirrel riding a fucking scooter. Woo! You know what I mean? They would have stupid little like special interest piece because they literally just didn't have. And that's when the rise of punditry came, right? That's when you started getting the talking heads. That's when you started getting the really, really like partisan divide. And you're right, it does. It comes out of the AM radio era. That Rush Limbaugh era. That and let's face it, it was like old like white working class men that were listening to that, right? Like who's listening to AM radio at 4 o'clock in the morning? You know what I mean? It's not the black youth. It's definitely not that, right? So, they know exactly who their targets were and who exactly they were going for. And it's, you know, every side now is trying to shape this as it's just the immediate finger pointing. You know what I mean? One side's calling for blood, and then the other side's saying, we've never, because you do, like, I mean, I have to agree that the language that the left uses sometimes is pretty, like, like, it's pretty inflammatory. You know what I mean? You're going to incite people to violence whenever you keep calling them Nazis, calling them racists, calling them this or that. And the people that are actual Nazis and racists should be held accountable for that. But actual Nazism in America is mostly kind of cosplaying. You know what I mean? The actual, like, yes, there is technically a Nazi party in America that still exists, but it's not like, we're not talking about the Nazi party of 1933, right? So there's these kind of like distinctions in the way that people talk about what we're talking about that I think now are important, right? Like if you're going to like call Charlie Kirk a Nazi, like, or say that he's a Nazi, do we have any proof that he's a
okay.
Nazi?
The Nazi, and I get that because I think that we like throwing these words around. But
Yeah,
but Nazi now is kind of a placeholder for radical, because that's what he is.
right.
He's a radical, and the radicals are.
Right, but to a
It's just
dumb
a placeholder.
20-year-old kid, they don't know the difference.
Well, but no,
Yeah,
but they don't know the difference between what communism is and what they've been told communism. I mean, there's a lot of words like that. So I mean, I get it. I don't like it being thrown around
very
either. But
true.
he's also just a
Exactly.
radical, and
Exactly.
this we radicalizing. We talk about, that's what we always put that word with terrorism. But now let's think about it in America itself. The radicalizing of the
Yes.
youth through rhetoric. We were talking about this, Aleph and me, a little earlier before we started recording. He's really good at debating. He's really good about putting himself out there. His rhetoric is very strong. And that's
Hmm.
why he has made such an influence.
Right.
But just because you have good rhetoric and you win a debate doesn't mean anything you said during the entire period of time actually had any
No, no, no,
basis
no,
in
no.
fact.
Don't get me wrong. Yeah, don't get it
So,
twisted. Yeah,
so
don't
no,
get
I
it
mean,
twisted.
but
I'm
that's
not
the thing
saying
is like,
that.
but this
agreed with Charlie Kirk's opinions on things.
no, but
Yeah.
the problem is also in how he gets himself in this situation. And I don't agree with it, like, right? That's not what I'm saying. But he's also become close to the president of the United States.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No,
And
don't get me
he's,
wrong. Like
because he's, even though
if
he's
you
not
play in
in
these circles,
politics, he is
right,
definitely in politics. And
right,
so,
right.
you
Well,
know,
if
in
you
this whole
play in these
violence thing, I mean,
circles,
it's
yeah,
right. But the things he's saying are actually violence inciting. You start talking about how many transgenders are actually involved in all these shootings. Let's take a look at who's involved in these shootings. They're usually
hmm,
white males from the middle
yep,
class in
yep,
their early teens to early 20s who don't have any family or just don't have connection to reality, who have gotten radicalized on the internet by one side or the other, or just some
yep.
random freaking Chinese troll fucking with America. It ain't transgender people. And if it is, it's because you fucked with them so long they lost it and wanted to be like the rest of you. I just don't get it. I don't get it.
I would say that I agree with this whole idea of I completely went out of my head, but at the same time, um, it is one of those things that really is concerning because of what is going to happen, and especially I don't necessarily try to read the people minds of the people who commit such acts, but at the same time, one of the things was perhaps that stirring up that pot of violence because at this point, as you mentioned, I mean, the truth are so different from both sides that they can't even agree on the very basics of reality. And when it gets to the higher ups, as we see it in different parts of the administration, when he gets close to this extremely ideologically out of the ordinary, I will say, because people like Stephen Miller, people like some other folks that are involved in his administration and they're not elected officials, they have a lot of rhetoric that coincides and goes very close to what Charlie Kirk used to say. And I don't know the reason, but it seems to me that even that small amount of loss of power, and it wasn't even loss of power that white Christian men experienced, really, it was presentation of there were more
Social capital.
colors behind the president. Yeah, like
Social
there were
capital. They lost some
different
social
looking.
capital. It became a little bit more like there was, reports talking about more and more people being unreligious, whether they were agnostic or atheist. They just weren't going to church, and it wasn't a big part of their life anymore. There was a lot of that through the 80s and 90s and early, aughts, and that below you have this underpinning of them, the Rush Limbaughs of the world, stoking that fear about this tiny little loss in social capital. It's got nothing to do with financial capital. We can still look at the money and the control and the power in this world. And white males, usually of the Christian denomination, tend to have most of that.
At least in
Yeah,
America, for
At
sure.
least in
Yeah,
America.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, one of the arguments that it is made that the young generation, especially, has given up on American dream, so to speak, having a home, stable income,
Hmm.
something you can call a family, and it is this and that and the other, is because
People like that are
boomers,
really easy to radicalize. People like
yeah,
that are
and they
incredibly easy
see
to
that
radicalize.
they see the average age of the House of Representatives is 87, the average age of Senate is 95. All the power is in the hands of those who have large properties, big investments, huge amount of tax reduction and tax breaks. And it seems to me that I'm not ageist, but we really need to have more representation in our government because the way it looks, it is so disconnected from everyday people that when they see someone like Charlie Kirk, um, again, the names are escaping, but there's not one or two, right? There's multiple people that occupy powerful positions in the alternate media because all of us, almost every single person that I am interacting, has completely given up and is disappointed from mainstream media. There's really nothing out there that's worthy of your time. Now, I will defend because I'm a liberal, I will defend lefty media a little bit, because it seems to me that when they are not trying to create a world and a truth for you, they're just trying to interact what the Republicans are building. Namely, white men are under threat of genocide. There is a white replacement theory. Brown people are coming for your money. Immigrants are stealing jobs. While Jay has said multiple times that you worked in the construction, if they kick out immigrants, we will not have houses and food to eat.
Like,
That's not a good combination.
Elon Musk is wanting white people to have more children, pretty much, because we need more children for the economy. It's not for anything else. It's for productivity in the economy, which means we just need more workers. But all the workers are right there. I mean, like these people are coming to our country, the majority of them, to work for wages our children won't, doing jobs that our children won't, to live usually in multi-generational households, and to give their children a chance to have a better life than they could have where they were at. And
Right.
we need them. This country is
And the amount of violence that those people actually commit in America is so infinitesimally small. Like
most crime is American upon American. The majority, we're like way up there, like way up there. The amount of like actual immigrant on American crime is very, very small, but they want to act like it's an invasion. There are a lot of people here from other countries that are probably undocumented, but 99% of these people are just doing what they can do to survive, raise their children, and give them a life
They
better than
actually
themselves.
don't do shit.
Absolutely.
They actually don't do shit. Occasionally, you get one or few. You get a fluke every now and again. You're always going to have that in a population, right? You're always going to have, if you have illegal immigrants in your country, you're going to have illegal immigrants that commit crimes. It's just going to happen, right? The problem is that when it does happen, it's highlighted and amplified so much and blown out of proportion. You know what I mean? Like it. There's also a bunch of murders that were committed by Americans against Americans, right? And but if there we know that there's literally millions of undocumented millions of them. Statistically, you would expect a far higher rate of crime to be occurring amongst that population if they were nearly as bad as as people on the right want to make it out to be. But that's just it's not the truth. I mean, it's usually I mean, most illegal immigrants that I interact with or have interacted with, they will not even like sip a beer outside in their front lawn for fear of having the police roll up on. You know what I mean? They will not commit crimes because they. Do you think if you spent $20,000 to fucking have a coyote fucking bring you across the border to try to have a better life, and you manage to actually fucking get here and do it and establish yourself, that you're gonna like throw it all the way so you can commit some petty crimes in the United States? No, it's not. It's just not. It's
No,
not happening at the
and
scale in which people make it out to be. But again, it's the things that we use to incite the base, right? It's the things that we use. We pick it, we pull it out, we say, look at this, look at, even if this shooter was a trans person, right? That's exactly the narrative that they're going to jump onto. Look how violent the trans community is, right? When the trans community is actually a very, very small group of people in a huge population of Americans that do statistically way more violence against people than other people do. Um, but again, it'll be blamed, and
actually, they
what's
suffer
awful.
they suffer more violence than almost any other group in this country. They don't inflict it.
They're definitely more of and they're going to be at more of a target of violence now with this current narrative that's going on about, even if the trans person was the shooter was a trans person, it will be used as more political fuel. It won't be a conversation. It will just be about, let's pass more laws to limit, let's do this and do that, right? It'll turn ugly. It'll turn ugly very, very quick. And that's, it's a
You,
it's a it's
you
a
know,
crazy thing, because even Charlie Kirk wasn't even fucking nutty about transgenderism. There's a fucking clip of him debating somebody about it, and his whole thing is just like, I just want people to be over the age of 18. That's it.
this whole the for me it has become at least clear that talking about specifically transgender, but any issue that we consider social issues. As long as the right and the far right and right wing talks about white men being genocided, immigrants, transgender, all that stuff, they don't have to talk about the actual problem, which is financial inequality between a very small segment of people and a huge part of population. Now, we talk about Elon Musk a lot, but this past week, for people who don't know, there's a guy named something Elliott. What's his name? Owner of Oracle.
Uh, mm.
Yeah, something.
I know what you're talking
Or
about.
Dave.
He became the richest person in the world this week. He beat Elon Musk out. I do know that. I didn't know his name though.
His last name, I think, he's Elliott. I
Sam
wanted to
Elliott?
say.
Sam Elliott?
It's. I mean, he owns Oracle, and his son. He actually paid for his son, to buy the Larry Ellison, not Elliott. Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison paid for give his own son $10 billion to buy Paramount Sky, because Larry Ellison's son owns
This
Sky.
guy's a super Trump supporter. I heard about this story. Yeah,
And he
yeah,
became
yeah.
the richest man in the world because beating Elon Musk,
Yeah.
because he made $101 billion in one 24-hour day, which is one of the highest in the history of stock market. Now, I don't know how many people in your life make $100 billion in one day, but when we talk about who does what with their genitals, as long as we have to talk about that, then we don't have to talk about how is this motherfucker making $100 billion
Oh, bro,
in 1 year.
these people are so beyond us. You want to talk about weird morals? Like, did you hear that hot mic thing between Xi and fucking Putin, where they were like talking about how to get new organs and trying to live forever? That's the kind of people that we're dealing with. The people that are in power. They were caught on a hot mic, like talking about how, like, oh yeah, we could actually achieve immortality. Just got to replace this organ and that organ. You know what I mean? They were literally talking about like illegal organ transplants to like keep themselves alive forever. I'm like, what the fuck are these? This
The
is
Chinese government, especially, they also have a version of DARPA, Defense Advanced
Mhm.
Research
Yeah,
Program, something,
yeah,
and
scary
they
fucking
are
stuff.
really big on the
Yeah,
CRISPR thing,
yeah,
and the idea of being
building
able
superhumans.
to
Yeah,
um, even exchange organs for soldier of their own organs, like printing 3 or 4 livers
yeah,
for every battalion,
yep.
and then putting in a backpack and sending. I don't know if you all saw the. Now we can use this as a kind of segment back and forth between what's happening inside the U.S., what's happening outside, because as you mentioned, one of the reasons we have these young, disenfranchised people grabbing a bolt action and going and assassinating people, and those who are in power talking about transgender issues, while in my 44 something years of life, a transgender anything hasn't caused anything. Neither my egg prices, nor my security, neither the international situation of the United States has never ever been affected by LGBTQA plus community, which pronoun. Like, I'm a teacher, I don't mind, because in Farsi we don't have any pronouns. Male and female are the same thing.
Hmm.
Since the moment I came to the US, I had to deal with more than one pronoun. So for me, it's
Yeah,
like, put
that's fair.
11. I don't care. As long as you correct me when I'm wrong and don't take it personal, fine. You want to call yourself Z? Z is talking. Whatever. I don't
Yeah,
care. Yeah.
I honestly
But
don't give a shit. I think it's all
I don't.
retarded, but I don't give a shit.
One of
Like,
my family members gave me this amazing T-shirt that says, "You can pee next to me. That's fine. You can do it. Just let's not have a conversation. I don't care what you do with your junk. Just do it and be." But at the same time, this inequality, this idea of, as you mentioned, one of the reasons, especially Democratic Party and someone who was part of the Democratic Party, we are losing men is because, I'm not speaking for women, I'm going to speak for men. They're losing hope of ever owning a home, which is quite important in the US. Now, forget about the racial and, the whole historical redlining, the loan, the immigrants walking such a fine line that many of them don't even apply for loans when they think their credit score is low. Believe it or not, for the first few years that I was in the US, before my green card comes, I was told very clearly, you're walking on thin ice. You cannot, for anything other than even a speeding ticket can completely derail your thing, because the whole point of this game is for you to prove you're not a burden to society, right? And immigrants, even the ones that are undocumented, they pay taxes, in sales taxes, in other taxes. They might not pay this or that, but at the same time, one, as you mentioned, the rate of crime of immigrants, legal or undocumented, is much lower than native population.
I don't know. It really
Secondly, the
bothers me when someone tries to sell me tamales in a parking lot. It's horrible. You know what I mean? It's fucking awful when some fucking little old lady who's just trying to like provide maybe a better life for her kids and her family and has probably been through more shit and has never hurt anybody. Yes, exactly. Except, yeah, the cholesterol. But
but
again,
as long as we don't address this inequality that exists in the U.S. to such a high degree, like you have seen it more than I do. Like Jay, you have seen it in Florida probably more than anywhere else. But man, a lot of places, any large city I go to in the U.S., it's unbelievable how inequality is affecting. And I wanted to pass it to you by saying I'm not talking about sameness. I'm not asking a homeless in Skid Row get paid the same amount of money as the guy who invented tooth or whatever. It's equality, it's access, and we're not addressing that, honestly. We're just giving people more guns and telling them your problems are coming from that guy or that gal or that person who looks different than you. So go solve it. And it happened in Utah as well. But
but I mean,
anyway,
I would like to end on the Utah thing just saying if you have a problem with somebody's ideas and their beliefs, you should have better ideas and beliefs and you should challenge them to a debate because the moment that you pick up a gun, you have lost the debate, right? Like the moment that you bet that it is antithetical to the way that our democracy, if we can keep one, I always go back to that, right? That's what the founding fathers said. You have a, well, they didn't say a democracy, but you have a republic, which is technically what we have if we can keep it. Um, that's it's not the right direction for us as a country to have this kind of shit going on. It just really isn't, because I don't think that people are going to let this go anytime soon. I think that it's going to get more dangerous, is unfortunately.
well, I think the what we were talking about in terms of connecting the international and national together is this idea of solving your problem from the barrel of the gun. And one of the things I will say is coming to the US for me, one of the biggest changes was the culture shock I experienced, especially when it comes to one of the earliest ways to make your ears become familiar with the English language is watching movies. And in a lot of movies that I watched, the hero never arrests the anti-hero and be like, you are under arrest, I'm gonna read your Miranda rights, are you ready, anything you say. No, man, he grabs the biggest baddest gun and turns that motherfucker into shit without any kind of law being involved. And obviously it's because arresting and legal processes doesn't make a good fun movie, but at the same time culturally it points to the fact that a lot of us are told by heroes to take the law into your hand. And again, and I said I did not live in inner cities in the US. I have not experienced that kind of inequality in the US. That's why any chance I get, I'm like, Jay, talk to me. What the hell is
Because the
what
police are not
happened
concerned with protecting the people, man. That's why people say that, right? Like, because we know that the police are not really concerned with. They're concerned with protecting property. That's what they're concerned with. They're concerned with property, not people.
Well, order as they call it, which is order where they don't have to deal with too much without you the whole idea of this, like this kid that shot Charlie Kirk. You look the idea that transgenders, that whole comment that he makes, involved in shootings, whatever number that is, let's take a real look. I mean, how many of these mass shootings have actually happened in black schools or African American schools with primarily African American students done by an African American male? Like, how does that, like, they live in these disenfranchised neighborhoods, these food deserts, these banking deserts with, generational redlining in places where, like the school I taught, you're losing 2 to 3 kids to gun violence every year, usually the good ones, and you're losing at least a handful of them to prison, some for the right reasons, some for the wrong reasons. But whenever a school shooting used to happen, I as a teacher down there, it was pretty, all of a sudden the assistant principal or someone from the office would come to my room and tell me what had happened and then take over my class. As I went from room to room, explaining to each teacher who's freaking out because they looked at their phone and reminding them that when our kids come, it's because someone earned or someone did something, and that kid's coming to shoot one kid. It's not a mass shooting. It's not a I'm depressed because my life sucks because my parents or the people of the fun. That's the thing is these white kids are the majority shooters, white young males who are confused and they're depressed and they're unhappy and we're shifting the blame all the time to immigrants or inner city violence or the homeless when really all that radicalization is going that direction, when really the radicalization or the truth would be the fact that people that look just like you, who could be your parents, chose this for you. They have created an economy that has provided you with this and a vacuous culture, a culture built on this, on production, on efficiency, on money, on possessions, not on emotional relationships, not on breaking bread. We could have a culture of civility and all these other things if that's what we chose as a country. But to blame anybody but a bunch of rich white guys is some bullshit. Because it ain't the immigrants. It isn't the inner city African Americans. It isn't the, China's not our problem. The people that run this country and have been running this country, and I mean both the politicians and the capitalists, have done a very poor job of doing anything to create a culture other than what we're getting today. Like, these kids are depressed. They have a reason to be depressed. Look at the fucking world around them.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a moral rot. Right?
Homelessness is going to grow.
Rot. Like, there is a rot in America, and it is specifically, I think, centered in the young white male. You have to, there is, and you're right. Like, the young black male is also violent, but they're violent for different reasons, right? Like, there is, they are in an inner city situation. There's gang warfare. There is broken home. We can talk about why these places are the way that they are and how they've systemically been created. That's a conversation for a different day, right? But you're absolutely 100% right. It is 95% of the time a white young male shooter, right? There, I believe, have been 5 that have identified as trans, possibly trans, of, I believe, 6,000 school shootings. There's a really interesting interview that Channel 5 did with the guy who was asking Charlie Kirk the question when he got shot. So the last person to speak with Charlie Kirk while he was alive. And that's what the question was about. The question was about how many, and that was the point that he was going to make. This young man that was debating Charlie Kirk was that out of, I believe, the 6,000 school shootings that had occurred since Columbine, 5 of those school shootings involved someone from the trans community, and then Charlie Kirk got shot 2 seconds later. And if it was somebody from the trans community, it's going to be really bad. It's got, you know what I mean? Just the left or the right is, I mean, they already have, right? Like, we don't know for sure yet about this. I don't think they know. don't think anybody should try to make any assumptions about the motivation of this person. They're not talking either, as far as I understand, to investigators. So, I think I think it's a dangerous thing to make any assumptions about who this person was, is, and what their motivations were. All literally, people are just trying to like glean. The only thing that we have is like furry memes shit that was like written on the bullets, and again, like just getting all of this from fucking Cash Patel. So fucking, I don't know,
And
man. I don't.
it doesn't really matter, because the baseline
It
thing
doesn't
is, I
really
like to
matter,
go
right?
back to the bottom. This is just about violence in this country, radicalization in this country. He is one man out of how many people in the political sphere who have been shot or attacked compared to previous time periods in this country, when we still have a president who is inflaming that radicalization. This isn't, I mean, I don't see, like, we're talking about it in a very rational, realistic manner here, and we're doing into details about specifics, but in general, the scene, a bunch of angry white people or disenfranchised white people are willing to bring the rapture about in some sense, because they're so afraid of having to accept other people for who they are and the positions that their power have put these people in. That's the biggest problem. They're so angry, and maybe it's just because they're unwilling to accept the fact that they need to apologize for doing what they've done. That generationally, their families, their heritage, they always talk about this. Don't want to be guilty. Their kids feel guilty because they look around them. It doesn't matter what your parents tell you. I always say that too. Kids are really. It's not always what you say; it's what you do. Look at the culture around them. Look what is valued, and what do you expect? It's vacuous. We've left them nothing. There's no reason for them to live, and unfortunately, I've always said that too.
Yeah, we don't even know how to parent
It's
them anymore. Most of them
it's
don't even know how to parent them.
it's horrible, because
Like,
suicide somehow, which hey, if that's what you want to do, and I know people don't like that, but if that's what you feel at that moment, sometimes that's the right decision. But now they do suicide by homicide. Like, no one can just go, none of these kids, just go home and put that thing here and solve the problem. Why do you have to take out innocent children? Why do you have to take out
here's the
innocent people?
problem.
What
Yeah,
what
here's the
what's
problem
twisted?
with
Like,
like
what causes that?
here's the problem with what's going to happen too, because of this like situation. Like, this kid comes from a family that is pro-Trump, right-wing, conservative, raised Mormon values, everything right, everything that they thought that they could do right, right? So what happened? You know what I mean? Like, what happened? It's they're trying to say about, there is sort of this idea about like a moral rot in America, where the only way that we can get rid of that moral rot is by what the right wants to teach children, right? You know what I mean? Like, that's their approach to it, right? Is how
They are the moral rot.
that's the point I'm trying to make here. Or they're part of we're all part of the moral rot. All of us are, right? Like, everybody's part of the fucking moral rot in America.
Some of us refuse all that shit. I ain't part of no moral rot. I'm pretty good with. I'm not part of that moral rot. They can fuck off. Now, I have my own morality, but I do
Well,
accept
you
it.
could say, I mean, but if you are, like, if you claim that we are all connected generationally, right, to what we're doing, to what we've done to this country, then we are part of the
Okay,
moral
well,
rot,
okay, maybe
right?
I accept my moral rot, which makes it a little bit less of a moral rot. How about that?
I mean, you can dice it any way you want to, right? But we all participate in this system, and we are all part of this experiment, right? So, we are all connected to it. Um, it's
The
I
present
think
day
that it really
twisted.
needs to be reiterated that only 5 people have been identified as trans in out of 6,000 school shootings. That is an important number and an important statistic, I think, to remember. I don't want to break it all down to statistics, but you're going to see one side that's really going to try to blame trans people for this. And I've got my own things with like trans people. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think you should be doing hormone replacement therapy on children. I don't think you should be doing top surgeries and bottom surgeries on children. When you're over the age of 18, you can do whatever the fuck you want to. It's your body. But it's just me personally. That's my own fucking morality, and I'm gonna fucking stand on it, right? But the problem is that this is going to be turned into a trans people are violent trans people, and what's going to happen too is a lot of the LGBTQ community are abandoned. They're trying to jump out of that. You know what I mean? They're also kind of upset with sort of the things that they've seen happen in the trans community, right? And I'm not saying I don't want anybody to get this twisted. I have absolutely no fucking. And if you want to claim that you're a woman, fine, you're a fucking woman. All right, like sure, okay. But I this is going to get twisted in a way that makes the trans community more at danger than they have ever been. And that's, if we're trying to talk about civility and peace and narratives and dialogues and understanding, the the right's not doing a good job and I don't think they want to do a good job. I don't think they want to have a civil conversation right now.
No, their morality is to you're either with us and you're going to heaven, or the rest of you are just sinners and you need to go ahead and get on with things.
Right, right. And for the rest of us who are kind of in the middle,
but
it's
the transgender community is just being given a greater dose on an already long list of communities that this right-wing conservative movement has already upset. So it's just immigration has been the biggest story outside of, like, maybe the militarization of cities.
Yeah, we didn't
So we're
talk
just
about
we're
it.
just we're just add,
Next
but we're just
recording,
adding
we'll talk about everything
we're
else,
no
yeah.
but we're adding, all I'm saying is we're just adding one more group. We're adding a greater dose of that into the conversation, if that has anything to do with it, but we still don't know, so none of that really matters. It still comes down to stoking anger at the other. And this is the repercussions, and yet they're trying, the Republicans have no ground to stand on. If they listen to their leader, they are not in the actual mode of finding a way to have a discussion. They are stoking the fire. And so once again, it can only be brought down from the inside. They're trying to force a morality on people that, growing up in a very, very, very evangelical family and knowing many, many, many others and having talked to many from many religions, the reality of the world outside of you, when you've been raised in such a closed-minded, narrow, moralistic, judgmental, anti-everything belief system, it can be pretty hard to cope with. That alone is a level of PTSD that's social in its own way, because you don't know how to communicate with the other, because the other has only ever been your religion.
Yeah, well, and they don't even understand the facets of their religion. They don't even
Well,
understand.
there's not. Yeah, the people nowadays don't. I mean, I'm not saying that, but
No, they
even,
don't.
but
They
that's the other thing is,
100%.
when you grow up
Yeah,
like that and you look around and see what the leaders of these belief systems are doing, you have a real hard time believing it, and then you realize you've been indoctrinated your entire life. Like I said, it's hard to leave these systems, because when you live in them, and they're trying to force this on everybody. They want prayer in school. They want the Ten Commandments in the school. All that shit. It has nothing to do with anything. We need to make this country better. We need to get civil. We need to have conversations. If they're the example they want this country to be, then it is an ugly, ugly morality.
I think that's where again, I don't want to put words in your mouth or speak for you, but I think at some point we have agreed in the past that that's why I will say this, and you can agree or disagree, that the biggest problem that we are facing right now is not Islamic radicalism or jihadi. It is religious radicalism. It is religious extremism. It is the idea that someone allows themselves, either by history, by ideology, family connections, power, to relegate their morality to the upstairs management and do the most atrocious, the most heinous, the most evil actions while justifying some sort of a 5,000-year-old Bronze Age deity in the middle of nowhere, Middle East. I don't even really am interested in entertaining that. However, I will also repeat what you said, Nasty, that it really doesn't matter to them. The same way as the Pizzagate, right? The guy had a pizza shop, for the love of God. He had nothing to do with anything. This is gonna, in my opinion, go towards the same direction that somebody was saying. Statistically, you can make Americans believe or do anything. It's really not that hard. Statistically, about I'm going to put their number at 20 million. I'm not even going to go higher than that. 20 million people in the United States, regardless of left or right. If you can make them believe the earth is flat and humans and dinosaurs live together, trust me, you can convince them of anything, and they have no problem relegating morality to upstairs. I was watching a HBO Vice program about the second coming evangelicals that are technically Christian Zionists. They are the ones that actually, the reason they love Israel and they want this whole thing happen to Israel is not because they love the Jews. It's because they want the Christ to come back, do the whole rapture thing, kill and convert. It's like,
they can justify like destroying the environment, right, and things like that, and pilfering the earth, even though in the Bible it says that we should respect the earth and that we live. Anyway, again, this is another problem with Christianity and the modern interpretations of Christianity is that it's grossly cherry picked, and they only pick out the parts that serve to better their own position and strengthen their positions. That's not real Christianity. That's not being Christ-like, right? Like it's completely antithetical
and
to.
honestly, one of the reasons
So
I
I
see
don't.
we talk about this whole identity stuff, a lot of it comes from pastors. Like, I have watched some pastors saying stuff that it would blow your mind. And these are some famous ones, like Joel Osteen and these multimillionaires. I never forget when I was doing valet, we had to do Southern Baptist Convention. And it was in the most expensive hotel in Dallas, Texas, W Hotel at that time. And this hotel had about 20 cars spots in the front. You know, when you can park expensive in valet, you park expensive cars in the front. We parked so many Rolls Royces in the front that we ran out. We had to take Rolls Royces and Bentleys and extremely expensive cars to the parking lot where the working man.
Yeah,
And I was like, how are you guys are priests? How
yeah.
can priests have like 45 Rolls Royces? I don't
This
know
is
much about
a
Bible, but I
so
know
this
this
is
thing
an
that in part of
element.
the Bible says a rich man goes through the gates of heaven harder than a camel goes through the eye of the needle.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
did not see that in Southern Baptist preachers. They were not
So
going to go
there's a
through the gates of heaven.
branch of like evangelical Christianity that's kind of sprung out. They call them said they preach what they call the prosperity gospel, and that is what this is all kind of related to, right? Like, so think of like your Joel Osteens. Who's the other guy who was like, I blow COVID away? Do you remember that guy? The guy. He was the guy they
It's
interviewed
not
him
a
about
Pat
like
Buchanan, nah.
why he has to like fly on like private jets, and he was just like, because the demons fly, coach. Like he was, yeah, like there's some of these guys that are really heinous and really egregious, and they justify it. You know, they use these sort of like, even though all of the money that they're making is based off of like, the donations made by some lady on Social Security, who's just like, giving all her money away because she saw Joel Osteen's really powerful message on the Bible Network, and it just moved her so much that of course she needs that $80 so she could buy her medicine in the month. But you know what, God's gonna return her you know what I mean. That's how they sell this to people, and it's really gross and disgusting.
Well, and even outside of that, because there's always going to be scam artists and everything. I will say this: that's one thing at
Grifters,
least that
yeah.
if you go to these major churches, at least fundamentally, foundationally in the past, the ones that my family was involved in, that grew up to be some very large churches in South Florida. One thing they did was offer financial counseling, because here's the deal: is the more money your congregation makes, even at 10% tithe, that's good money. You want these people to be wealthy, and you want that power base, because people that are wealthier vote in a particular way compared to people who don't have money. So the church is smart in that way. At least some churches have been historically, where they're building the base power by building the capital underneath their congregation, which of course just makes it so that that end has more influence in general. And then those people do. Because if you prosper off of something, you do want to give back. And so they will fund these various other, agendas to get money into politics.
And the most important part of this conversation is that pastors and religious organizations and churches do not pay taxes in the US. And as long as they don't pay taxes, you have no idea. I've seen some of the people that have worked in mega churches have told me that they move money with wheelbarrows down in the basement. At the end of a big Sunday church, like at Easter Sunday, that shit flows. And when you have a 5,000, 10,000 people church that all of them are, I'm not saying gonna say higher class, but they're middle class enough that even if each contributes a $20 bill, at the end of the day you have $8,020 bills sitting around at the bottom. And that is not how it is, because you mentioned, at least in Texas it wasn't. This family was not gonna donate $100 to the fucking church. We're talking thousands of dollars donations,
Oh,
because
they
it's
wouldn't
not
even
just.
open their basement during the hurricane to let
No,
people in. Come
no.
on, you
And
think that
there is this competition between church members to donate and be the top donor and get the plaque above the Jesus's right balls instead of left balls.
people want legacy, right? They want that legacy. They want to feel, I mean, why do you think half of these kids go on these mission trips? They don't go on these mission trips because they generally want to like help the kids of Ghana. They do it because it's gonna look good on their fucking Harvard application. You know what I mean? Like that's,
Or
unfortunately,
SMU application, the
or
legacy
SMU or
schools.
whatever. Yeah, whatever
And
legacy.
as long as they talk about this kind of stuff, they don't like transgender issues or issues with this and that. They don't have to talk about extreme privileges, tax benefits, that kind of stuff that they get. They don't have to talk
Yeah,
about
again,
extreme access they have to
the culture
power.
wars
Like,
are powerful, right? The culture wars are very, very powerful, but they're just distraction.
if you don't fight racists and Nazis and nationalist Christians and X, Y, and Z on the stage of a university, next stop is a battlefield. And I promise all my liberal friends, you don't want to face these people on a battlefield. That's just my
No,
experience.
no, you don't.
So and I don't quote Hitler often, but he says a nation believes a big lie much easier than a smaller lie. That's why you go and tell them they are the chosen one, they are the Ubermensch, they are X, Y, or Z, they are manifest destiny, God bless America, CD shining on the hill or whatever, because they don't want it to believe. Especially we are, as you mentioned, we are uneducated enough as a population that you can make 20 million of us do anything. So it's a dangerous combination.
Yeah.
One of the things I tell my liberal friends is like, please don't, if you're trying to legislate, at least know what you're talking about, right? Because, for example, I live
Well,
in California. Gun laws in California are a joke. They're a joke. Like, as a liberal who wants sensible gun laws, I'll tell you, they're stupid. Majority of them are absolutely stupid. They don't stop anything. Yes, we have less mass shooting in California, but that's not because the laws are better. It's just because it is that much harder to get a weapon. It is not because they legislate sensible guns. It's because which again, that's a solution out to its own. But so that, with that being said, I just wanted to hope that people chill out. And as much as Charlie Kirk, as much as I disagree with him, he was the father of two young kids. I've seen a video of them running towards him, and I'm like, I don't agree with nothing of he said, but he didn't deserve
he was a father.
such
He's a
public
father. He's
execution.
a
It
husband.
was.
Yeah.
It's not any society that I think any of us wanted to be a part of. I had this conversation with my Iranian friends yesterday. They were talking about, well, the guy was saying this and that. Muslims are this, Iranians are that, kill everyone. I was like, go stand in front of him and say the opposite. I have no problem with that.
Guys,
But
this is the United States of America, and we have the freedom of speech here. And
it is
freedom of
really
speech
bad.
is a two-way street. Okay, it's not just freedom, it's freedom. The moment that you try to silence the voice that you disagree with is the moment that you've lost the argument. right? That is
Yeah.
true fascism, right? Like that is actual fascism, like to kill, to just silence a political opponent. I mean, that technically is, right? So we need to remember that. And I think we need to remember that dialogue is what this country should be based on, and we should do.
Break bread with
Yeah.
somebody that doesn't look like you.
And we are humans. We have to live right next to each other. There is, unfortunately or fortunately, there's no other way around it. We are not able to live solitary lives outside in the woods as much as I like. Very few of us can. Jay's probably can go in the middle but even you have to go to a store and get something. Does that make, it's, we cannot live without each other, and it's really hard to tolerate the difference. I agree, but it is an art, and if you can do that, we all live in a better society. That has been another episode of Heretics to Hegemony. Who, as always, we go longer than we want because there's a lot to say, and we still didn't get to talk about Russia, Israel, Ukraine, and the impending nuclear holocaust that's upon us.
Next week.
Such positive,
Such positive
parting,
note to
guys.
finish.
Next week.
And next
So
week, thermonuclear
next week.
war.
So until the next thermonuclear war, have a great week, and we will come back next week and see y'all. Take care of yourself, and peace out.